And tonight we continue to monitor breaking developments surrounding the Anthony Weiner scandal. And joining me now in studio with more on that, plus an exclusive first look at what is soon to be a New York Times #1 bestseller. It's the explosive, controversial new book, Demonic: How the Liberal Mob is Endangering America. It hits stores tomorrow morning. Best-selling author Ann Coulter is here. First of all, the book is phenomenal. I just, every time I read your books, I want to know where the liberals going to attack you. Let's start with the title. And a lot of what you say here fits into Weiner.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, I mean, certainly the liberal reaction to it. Part of what the book is about, and the reason it's called Demonic, is that I've always sort of noticed that liberals behave in a mob-like way. And so I read every book I could find that mentioned mobs, crowds, groupthink, and finally read Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd, Study of the Popular Mind, which he's the father of groupthink, French philosopher, social psychologist. And you read his book, and page after page, oh, that's liberals, that's liberals. For example, creating messiahs. A crowd very quickly goes to extremes. They're simple-minded. They will create messiahs. And I think, a hilarious chapter, only because I quote liberals, on what they say about FDR, JFK, about Clinton, about Obama, the angel Obama. They're fainting at his speeches. They're pledging their loyalty to him. Same thing with Clinton. Go back to him. And meanwhile, Ronald Reagan wasn't even the most popular conservative his first year in office. My newspaper, Human Events, which was Ronald Reagan's favorite newspaper, was attacking him so much. The Washington Post reported at one point that Reagan said to them, "I'm still reading you guys, but I'm liking it a lot less." Yeah. And I have headlines throughout all 8 years of the Reagan administration. We don't worship our leaders. We don't turn them into idols, probably because we have a real savior. And we certainly don't demonize the opponents the way we do. We may ridicule them, make jokes about them. But the way they turn George Bush into the enemy, a Nazi, George Soros and Al Gore, and have all compared him to Hitler. He was compared to Osama bin Laden by a New York Times op-ed writer. William Raspberry, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, liberal, called him the devil. And these aren't intended to be jokes. They are not taken as jokes. And then you do get actual violence from the left. You still get it now. I have a big part in the middle comparing the French Revolution and the American Revolution. It's something liberals lie about. I was surprised at how many of my friends knew very little about the French Revolution, and then you always see it being lied about, including on Chris Matthews' show last week. Oh, it was just like ours. Wasn't that for liberty? And the New York Times talks about Bastille Day being the equivalent of the 4th of July. No, Bastille Day, it would be as if this country celebrated the L.A. riots. It was a monstrous, bestial attack on a nearly empty prison because it was an eyesore based on rumors. This is the revolt of a mob. It was an extremely anti-religious revolution. They desecrated Notre Dame. In fact, the word vandalism had to be created because of the French Revolution and what they did to the churches and monasteries. They destroyed ancient, valuable monasteries, ripped them to the ground, hacked priests to death, gave mock sermons, wiping their behinds with the host and talking about the whore, the Virgin Mary. That was their revolution. It's the revolution of the mob. It was then followed in Russia. It was followed in Cuba. It was followed in China. It was followed in Cambodia. And by the way, liberals in this country, in the New York Times, cheered on all those revolutions that followed the French Revolution. Oddly, the successful revolution, our revolution, which was fought by Christians, Englishmen, thinkers, debaters, that has not been followed around the world. Interestingly enough, the Tea Party, the original Boston Tea Party, was not warmly embraced by our founding fathers. They were worried about it because they thought it was the action of a mob.
Well, let me just go. And right out of the box, you talk about the psychology of a liberal, and you talk about the Democratic Party as the party of a mob. Irrespective of what the mob represents, they activate mobs, they depend on mobs, they coddle mobs. You know, you're on Good Morning America tomorrow. The first question is going to be, are you saying all liberals and all Democrats are mobsters, Ann Coulter? There's a point that you're making. That's why I wanted you to go uninterrupted here, because throughout the book, you're laying out a case that ends in a conclusion. And it's not something we could even get in 2 segments, but I really want you to follow through from that starting point and all the examples, and you lead us through the French Revolution. to conclude, to come up with this title, demonic, which they'll freak out about.
Right.
Why? How do we get there?
I began the book with the scene in the Bible when Jesus approaches the possessed man, and the possessed man's screaming, he's out of his mind, he's naked, he's running around. Legion. Don't torture me, don't torture me. And Jesus, there's a little exchange. Jesus says, what is your name? And he answers, my name is Legion. Then the demons run out of him. The demon's name is Legion. The demon is always a mob. And you see this over and over again in real-life exorcisms. They talk to the possessed, and it's always they. Satan saying, they all belong to me. And this is, I mean, it's part of why liberals are a mob and are so obsessed with status and power. Conservatives, as I said, have a real savior. It's more up and down. We don't care as much. In fact, Christians kind of like to be hated.
Is that you saying that all liberals are demonic? You're not saying that. There's a point, though, that you're making about...
Mobs are always demonic. They are antithetical to this country's history. We have always understood that mobs were dangerous. I mean, the Shays Rebellion is what created the Constitution. It was a mob uprising, and the Articles of Confederation weren't enough to keep the people safe. As I say, the Boston Tea Party, they were very concerned that it looked like the action of a mob, and two of the participants, Paul Revere and Sam Adams, specifically defended the Boston Tea Party, saying there was no property destruction other than the tea. Ben Franklin insisted that they take up a collection to repay the India Tea Company. Paul Revere made sure there was the lock that had to be cut for the Boston Tea Party was replaced, and one guy who took tea for his personal use was severely punished. It was not the act of a mob, but even that much upset them. Then
we're going to come back, and as with all of your books, we try to predict where the attacks are going to come from.
You can't do it.
Well,
let's take an office pool here at Fox and see if anyone can. But you're all going to have to read the book.
I'm going to tell you where I think it is, and we'll tell you in the break. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back much more with Ann Coulter straight ahead, and we'll.
Let me just get to this little controversy. You've been all over the blogs in the last day or so. We canceled your appearance here on Tuesday, and from what I've been reading, you thought you were banned for life from the show. Were you behind that report?
No, I didn't say that. That was from a reliable news report. The point is, I was canceled twice, and it wasn't until the Drudge Report ran a headline on its own reporting, and the Drudge Report has never had to retract a report.
You know, the book is called Guilty, Ann Coulter. I'm glad you're back.
Oh, so am I. Thank you.
It's good
nice to see you again.
All right. We are going to, by the way, you're not banned for life, obviously. Okay. Your next book comes out.
Thank you. I'm sure delighted to hear that.
You'll be sitting right here again.
Wow. That was the last. You've been invited back?
No, apparently the Drudge Report is a better reporter than Matt Lauer, even about what Matt Lauer is going to do in the future.
Apparently.
So Drudge, right again, always believe Drudge.
But Good Morning America.
Banned for life.
And you're on The View later this week?
Yes, I am.
And then when you get under fire, we'll have you back about the first controversy.
We're thinking Thursday night.
Thursday night, which is, all right, look, I don't want to interrupt this. You and I had an hour debate on discussion on radio today, and I thought it was really fascinating. And I don't want to get into that because once we go down that road.
There's so much more in this book.
No, there really is. But I want you, the one thing we did not get to that I think is really important, I want to tie this tied into what is a very powerful conclusion. Because I think you're leading up to something, and I want you to explain to people what it is.
I think Americans at this point, well, I was starting to say just before the break, Americans have always understood the danger of mobs. They are always dangerous. They are always demonic. Thus, the Shays Rebellion, the creating our Constitution, the Boston Tea Party not being so warm, feeling so warmly about that. You had
I
during
like the Boston Tea Party, though. Taxation.
Well, it was very peaceful. The only thing more peaceful than the original Boston Tea Party are today's tea parties, where they leave the mall cleaner than when they got there. Okay, then during the Civil War, you had again, Democrats in New York engaging in massive, horrible mobbings against blacks in New York, lynchings, draggings by genitals. And Abraham Lincoln sees another Democrat mob, they're always the Democrats, sends the military little detour up to New York, crushes the mob, goes back, wins the war, and then Abraham Lincoln carries New York in the next election. So we've had mob uprisings before, but we've always known you can't reason with a mob. I think conservatives, I think a lot of peaceable Americans have forgotten that. We did have something as close as this country got to the French Revolution in the 60s with the Weathermen and SDS and the bombings.
And you have some interesting stuff in here about our buddy Bill Ayers. which was pretty. I'm not going to give it up because I want people to buy. All right.
A small item. But the point is, Nixon came in, shut it down. There was the shooting at Kent State. And gosh, I know liberals don't like it. And you look on Nexus and, oh, the whole country was embarrassed. Well, I'm not embarrassed. That's what you do with a mob. They were monstrous at Kent State. It was being led by Bill Ayers.
When you are dealing with mob rule, when you are dealing with, you know,
overreact.
Whatever. Well, okay. When you're dealing with a lie, too. Remember the road less traveled author Scott Peck also wrote a second book, The People of the Lie.
I think you're getting,
No. But when he's talked about when there's a lie, there's also evil. He was talking about that.
Right. I use him in my book.
But there is a sinister, predictable technique and tactic to attack and slander and besmirch people. For example, the latest one is on Medicare. What are you dealing with, and how do you effectively deal with it in the minute we have left?
That's all part of the crowd psychology. They don't. It's from Rousseau, the paranoid hypochondriac, that inspired the French Revolution. Don't speak to people in words. Use images. Speak to the heart, not to the head. Well, that's what they're doing with Medicare. They won't talk about the fact that it's about to go bankrupt. They'll just show a picture of Congressman Ryan pushing a woman in her wheelchair off
the cliff.
No, they use images. That's how you gin up a mob. You don't do it through careful arguments about how we need to cut taxes, because that will increase revenue to the government.
All right, we're going to see you later this week. It's in bookstores everywhere, Amazon.com.
As of midnight tonight.
Honestly, a really thought-provocative, well-researched book. Ann Coulter, thanks for being with us. I can't wait till you get in trouble.